Let's get into our first topic now, though. Should the assisted dying law be axed? Get your calls in. More than half of Brits fear that vulnerable people could feel pressured to end their lives early if the assisted dying law is passed, according to a poll carried out by YouGov. 58% of people were also worried that those with disabilities could be at risk of pressure to apply for an assisted death, and nearly two-thirds were worried about pressure being put on the elderly. On top of this, a poll of 103 MPs commissioned by the anti-euthanasia group Care Not Killing found that the bill, which is currently in the Commons, may no longer have the backing of enough MPs to become law. Samuel, there has been very great popular support for this bill, but it feels like in the Commons that isn't necessarily there. So which is more important?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't go as far as popular support, but there has been some support. And if you were to talk to many people who have personal experiences, maybe they've had a family member who was critically ill, they have really moving stories. But when you're in government or in parliament, your job is to legislate objectively. And there were challenges from the beginning. I think many members of parliament voted in favour of the draft bill for it to go to committee stage with the hope that it would then be improved, and they're finding that's the complete opposite. So for example, just one example, the original draft said that one doctor has to speak to a High Court judge for anyone to be able to have the permission to die in this way. But now it looks like that's going to be taken up because, where's the time in the courts for them to look at this, particularly when you're supposed to be critically ill for 6 months for you to be able to die. This idea of coercion being illegal, another big challenge, because how do you measure or know for sure that someone is or isn't being coerced, particularly if you have, for instance, one son or daughter and a mother who is old, the mother then dies. The only witnesses in that situation, if there is no other family member around, is the mother and the child. And so there are so many challenges
this kind of detail,
with legislation.
This is the detail that really counts. I mean, you may broadly be in support of the idea that people have the choice to end their lives, but the detail of how it actually works could be the matter of a consensual death.
Yeah.
And somebody that has been coerced or maybe feels pressurised to do it.
And so when you remove yourself from a personal situation and you look at it overarchingly and you say, well, there needs to be some exemptions for folks who are disabled, but 1 in 4 people in the UK are registered as disabled. That's 16.1 million people. So how then do you legislate for that? And there's a direct correlation between being registered disabled and being old. By 2045, 1 in 4 people in this country will be over the age of 65. And so there are really some interesting challenges that need to be looked at, which means that the legislation in its current form, even after this committee stage, is just not fit for purpose. And so I can empathise with people with their personal experiences, but from a law perspective, this is certainly something that we are not ready
Nina, if we can't get this detail, sorry, Samuel, if we can't get this detail right, Nina, should we just abandon this bill altogether?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. If you have any humanity and compassion, then you must know that people should be able to choose how they die. The point being that there is huge popular support. I mean, about 70% of people are in favour of assisted dying. There's no way that you could deny that we just have to face facts and say that people cannot be allowed to die in agony or pain or in such a diminished state that the quality of life is just not tenable.
The thing is, when I speak to friends that I have who are disabled, and they say they see the care system, the health system, in a completely different way to the way we do. They say that we see our lives as being worth less, as being decisions being taken on our behalf. This happens a lot. DNRs, there's a history, a track record of do not resuscitate labels being placed on people's records without their consent or knowledge. And you look at that, why should they trust that the same health system would make the right decision when it comes to ending their life?
Well, we have to put the safeguards in place. You have to trust. If you look at other countries where this happened, in Australia, for instance, where it is absolutely widespread, Canada, the Netherlands, Switzerland, there are countries, and countries are moving towards this situation. You put the safeguards in place. And of course, unfortunately, as in any situation, there will be incidents, there will be cases where you think, well, that shouldn't have happened. But that's completely outweighed by the number of people who will be affected positively by this. If our palliative care was sufficient and that people could die in dignity and without pain, then that would be a different situation. But for some reason, and I don't understand it, it's not. And besides which, when you get to a certain age, life begins to diminish. And I'm very lucky. I've reached this age without a major health problem. But there are people who are suffering, who have to go through and withstand tremendously. I don't think I could cope with having some of the debilitating illnesses that people are forced to undergo. I mean, I'd be on it if I could afford it, and I would be on a plane to Switzerland in 2 seconds.
But you probably have the resources to do that.
I don't have the resources to do that.
I never like to assume,
but
if you are in that situation, then it becomes a right that's only there for those who can afford it, rather than having it here close to
absolutely.
their
That's the whole point of it.
Okay.
It should be available to people who want and need that choice.
Okay, let's take a call. Poppy's in London. Poppy, would you trust the health system as you understand it to make that decision for you if it came to it?
Absolutely not. I am somebody who is restricted to bed full-time with a disability. I am completely against assisted dying. Last time I had to go to hospital, which was a few years ago now, the doctor said to my son as they took me in, "I presume you want a DNR notice put on your mother." To which my son very thankfully said no. There came a point where they could have done a DNR on me. I was not DNR'd, and I think it's about 10 years now. I'm still here. I'm still alive and kicking.
Poppy,
I'm still having a really good time.
Well, I'm so pleased you are, and I'm so pleased that you were let into that decision. But by the sounds of it, there was a chance there where the DNR could have been placed without your consent or knowledge, unless your family had told you about it.
Exactly. And thankfully, my son actually does know my views on DNR notices and assisted dying, and so was very anti the whole thing. And that's why I'm still here.
Poppy, I think you're brilliant, and I'm so pleased that that's worked out for it, and you're still here and you're enjoying life. But there are people...
a whale of a time.
Well, great. We should all be doing that. But there are people, Poppy, who might be in your situation or different situations and not be happy, be desperately unhappy and not able to cope with the situation that they're in. And for those people, perhaps there should be a choice.
I think that rather than a choice to possibly end a life because they're not happy, has anybody talked to them, found out what they're not happy about? What would they like to do? If they had the opportunity to do something and have fun, what sort of fun do they want? Why is it always the miserable route that people go down?
I think it's not easy to have fun if you have a debilitating disease where your muscles waste and you know
right.
that you're going to have a death that's really not.
Okay, from me, this is me. I am somebody, I have multiple sclerosis. I have been restricted to bed, unable to move now for I think it's about 10 years. So...
Well, Poppy, you have a great spirit, but there are others who are less courageous than you and have less of a force of life.
OK, Poppy, can I ask you very quickly, Poppy, would there ever be any safeguards in place that would make you happy for an assisted dying law to be in place?
No, under no circumstances.
Just don't trust the system enough.
I think what people forget is we only have one chance at being alive. It's not like we get to come back and have another go because this time round was bad.
OK,
what
Poppy...
we need to do is talk about how to make things better for the people while we still are alive and to make life more fun.
The right to assisted living is what we're talking about. Thank you so much for your call, Poppy, and sharing your situation. Linda's in Wiltshire. Linda, do you think it's time for an assisted dying bill, or do you think that actually the complexities, the safeguards that we need, will never actually get to an acceptable position with them?
I'm of the absolute opposite opinion of your previous caller. I am very firmly in favour. And can I give you the background to my belief?
Yeah, go ahead.
My sister and I kept my mother at home for her whole life. She went through 10 years of increasing dementia to the point that she didn't even know who she was, never mind who we were. We looked after her on our own with absolutely not a single day of help from anybody. And for several years, while she was still able to think coherently, would several times a day beg us to help her die.
The problem is,
and we had the same situation with my father, and I have got to the point where if there's no assisted dying, if I was in the same situation, I would take matters into my own hands.
So,
I would not live like that.
Linda, I'm so sorry to hear that, you know, what you've had to go through, and caring for somebody with dementia has got to be one of the most painful things that any of us can go through. However, I would say that an assisted dying bill may not have helped you, because for it to work, the person has to be terminally ill, have 6 months to live typically, and then be of sound mind. And with dementia, the chances are that a panel, the safeguard that would be in place to protect them, would say, I'm sorry, they haven't given knowing consent.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, I accept that, but I think you should be able to periodically throughout your life sign an affidavit to say, if I'm in this situation, I want to be allowed to die.
Okay. Linda, thank you. Thank you so much for sharing your story. We're going to move on because we've got so many calls coming in. Bob's in Yorkshire. Bob, do you think the assisted dying bill has come to the end of the road, that actually it's too complex to make it work? It works in other countries, though, doesn't it?
I don't. I think it has come to the end of the road. I'm 89 and very fit. An hour's yoga in the morning, power walk at lunchtime, and an evening walk. And when the time comes that I feel that I can no longer exercise properly and feel good, that's the time I want to go. And I want to have the right to do so without all this mamby-pamby and all these people who they're dying and they're ill for years. A lot of them are just cowards. Sorry about that.
That's okay. So the point being here, Bob, that you said it's reached the end of the road, but you would like to be able to have that choice. Samuel, I mean, what Bob's talking about is someone that's lived a full life, and when they get to the point where that stops, actually being able to say, I need to go now. What's wrong with that?
Well, the reality is that's not what we're trying to legislate for, right? That is illegal. It's illegal to kill yourself, like, for the avoidance of doubt. And that is not going to change even if this bill passes, right? So what we're saying is those who are critically ill, can we have legislation that means that if they still want to live, they aren't coerced to die? And I think that is the fundamental point here. And also, the thing is, we are living longer. There are many people who like Bob, are going to live beyond the ages of 89 and beyond. And so it's also very tricky for us to say this person definitely has 6 months left. In fact, I've heard countless stories of folks who the doctors said they had 6 months, 1 year, etc. 5, 10 years later, they're still alive, they're still healthy, and they're still benefiting from what the ultimate gift is, which is life.
But if they want to live, but if they don't want to live, I don't want to live beyond my life, if you see what I mean. And Bob, I completely understand your life. You are fit, you're well, and this is the life that you enjoy. But if that life stops or diminishes in a really negative way, I can completely understand why you would want to end it, because I would, in the similar circumstances, and I'm only a decade behind you, I would want that too.
But I mean, doctors can get terminal diagnoses wrong. People can live way beyond that. You know, the story of Wilko Johnson, the guitarist that we had, lived way beyond his diagnosis. I do want to take as many calls as we can get through. Christine's in Hampshire. Christine, what do you think? Is it time to axe the assisted dying bill?
Oh, yes, definitely. It should never have been brought in the first place. I think Nina's completely wrong. My argument is that the Ten Commandments, one of the Ten Commandments is, thou shalt not kill. It doesn't say, but if you think you've got a good enough reason, go ahead. And why? I think it's just completely wrong. And would Nina, when people commit suicide, everybody's horrified. I mean, it's not just physical illness, is it? It's mental illness as well. If somebody's very depressed and they take their own life, everybody's horrified. But because it's something physical, people seem to think, oh, it's fine, let's put them out their misery.
Yeah.
And it's completely wrong.
No, it's not
completely
people.
Wrong.
Christine, I disagree. It's not somebody putting somebody out of their misery particularly. It's that person deciding they don't want to go through the misery. It's not somebody deciding for them. So that's a completely different. And when you presumably when you take whatever drug it is that will end your life, you have to take it. I mean, it's not somebody making you take it.
But on the mental health front, where do you draw the line? Because, you know, as Christine mentioned, so many people, including young men, disproportionately take their lives because they feel like they've had enough. And so how do you define which enough is okay? Is enough because of the pressures of life? Is enough because of health complications, or is enough because you feel like you've had a full life? Okay. And how do you legislate for that?
We're not talking about somebody ending their life because they feel depressed, assisting them to do that.
No, but
that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about somebody who has an illness,
but not just on the
which is terminal, which they do not want to prolong, and they want to make sure that they have a death that is not painful and that it has in some measure of dignity.
Yeah, but you've mentioned quite a few times that, you know, if you've had a full and wholesome life, when you feel like you can no longer live the way that is full in not just your, but in somebody's subjective opinion, then they should have a right to say, well, that's enough. So my challenge with the current discussion and legislation is, where do you draw the line legally in a way that makes sense? Okay. And I think that's very difficult.
And you have to have that when you're dealing with life and death. You have to have clear guidelines that everybody understands. Let's take another call. Paul's in Merseyside. Paul, what do you think? Is it time for the assisted dying bill to be axed?
No, definitely not. I'm all in favour of it, because I think it's a fundamental right, and it's a matter of compassion to allow people to put an end to intolerable suffering. And I think there seems to be a misunderstanding here. Some people seem to be under the impression that it's going to be compulsory. No, it's only going to be the choice of the person who's suffering.
It's interesting when you talk about choice, though. There are people in situations where they're surrounded by people who could say, this looks like the best choice for you. And in that case, they effectively are being coerced. And that's a dynamic, that's things that the court would never see, doctors would never see. It would just be presented as a signature on a piece of paper.
Well, I think a point that's getting missed is that currently someone can, if they feel they're being a burden or whatever, commit suicide, non-medical suicide. And you can't stop that. But at least, if someone feels they want to put an end to their life because of suffering, it'll be done medically, cleanly, not a botch job, as sometimes happens with suicides.
Okay.
I absolutely agree with that.
We have to leave it there. Listen, thank you, Paul, and thank you all for sharing your stories.